Give you a little background. My name is James McCarter. I'm a former U.S. Marine, specializing in signals intelligence, CEO of Boise-based company Shadowscape, which is an intelligence-driven cybersecurity services training and analytics company. I'll let Jeff go ahead and introduce himself. A bit of a similar background, albeit more seasoned.
Very similar background. So I've been working IT for about 24 years now. 20 of that was in the Air Force, primarily cybersecurity, but really, I mean, whole spectrum of IT. And then I was hired on by then Governor OODA as the first director of information security for the state, and which through a series of consolidations and from an agency perspective. Now I'm the director of information technology services.
Great. Well, we wanted to get together today to kind of have an open dialogue conversation. So please feel free to participate. As we go through, we wanted to highlight some of the things that have happened over the past year and what it means from a security perspective. So I think it's pretty great that we pair up, Jeff and I, as we have a little bit of a dichotomy in terms of our approach. I work in the private sector. Obviously, Jeff works in the public sector. I provide, security services, largely medium and small businesses, especially. As we see a lot of vulnerabilities there, versus Jeff that's working to provide security solutions for a giant public network and get everything to talk to each other. So as we do that, I think in order to scope what we can probably expect through the coming year, it might be prudent to reflect a little bit about what we've seen over the past year, what trends that have happened, which can really kind of be a foreshadowing for what we can expect over 2021. So in doing so, I think the biggest hack that stands out is probably the SolarWinds hack. For those of you that aren't really familiar with it, SolarWinds is a major security provider, and unfortunately, through their asset tracking management platform called Orion, it was one of the updates that got pushed out, ended up being a major exploit, which kind of opened the door to a lot of follow-on exploitations as well, and allowing it to kind of work as a Trojan to allow additional exploitation. And unfortunately, there were, among the customers, there were a lot of major U.S. agencies, to include the Pentagon, Department of Homeland Security, the Treasury, State Department, and major organizations like Microsoft, Deloitte, Cisco, I believe, were among the victims. Included in that list was FireEye, which is a major managed security services provider, and they've got a lot of tools as well. But they were using that platform as well. Good on them. They were doing their due diligence, doing some threat hunting through their network, and discovered the exploit. And in doing so, kind of blew the lid off the whole thing. So that kind of led us to root cause discovery. So unfortunately, it's unknown how long the exploit lived within these networks, and that's pretty indicative for most of the major events that we see. So one of the things that I'd like to do is, throw it to Jeff and just kind of see, I mean, on your end, what is your takeaway from the entire event, and how has it impacted how you think of security among your network.
Sure. Yeah, and this was pretty scary just because of the complexity of the actual attack itself. And can you still hear me? I'm sorry, I don't know. Hopefully you can hear me. Okay, yeah, good. We're getting a little bit of echo there, but really the complexities of the attack itself it was mind-boggling, and the amount of time, effort, and energy that went into this. They were very patient, and how they went about exploiting SolarWinds could really happen to any product, right? It could have been Adobe, it could have been another Microsoft product, it could have been anything really. And I think that's what scares us the most, and moving forward with how they dealt with this particular exploit. For us, it was a bit disconcerting right up front that there wasn't really a definitive answer on how we can resolve it, right? So what's the fix action? And at first it was a specific version of SolarWinds, then it was the DLL, and then it was, maybe it's a combination of those, and then it was radio silence for a while, and we were sitting there flapping in the wind. So what we recommend, it was what we did, and then what we recommended to some of our other state agencies was to take it offline. And that has a big impact because now you're kind of flying blind on your network a little bit, but that was certainly, the pain was certainly worth, I think, what the risk was and what that represented. But moving forward, I don't know how this is going to manifest in the commercial side of the house, whether they need, there's certainly a need for tighter code control, maybe a third-party look that validates, a validation process that validates products. But it's going to be kind of a wild ride for the next few years, I think, until that really gets vetted out, and we have a really good understanding on how we can prevent that from happening again. From maybe what we can do to safeguard ourselves against something similar is looking at the boring stuff, right? Looking at those log files, looking at seeing elevated privileges, unusual activities and behaviors that normally wouldn't happen among a user group, and seeing if you can, just keeping an eye on those basic blocking and tackling. I think from that perspective, I think you can at least stay up with what some of the current threats are.
I think that's a huge part, and you really touched on it, is what we can do to protect ourselves. For me, this is a particularly scary hack because what's highlighted for me is the threat vector that was used, which is oftentimes not thought of, was supply chain compromise. When I think of elements of intrusion into the network, that's really just the beginning, right, of the attack campaign, at least in terms of being within the borders of the network. So within that, you need to think of an attack campaign and a lot of things, how we conduct intelligence analysis, in the actual intelligence community, in the Department of Defense, things like that, is we think through the steps throughout the campaign and the different levels of compromise that we can, focus on. So the exploit itself is scary, but you really hit the nail on the head about what we can do about it. If I were to really think about what it means for, what we need to do for our security solutions, it's to ensure that we're watching those follow-on steps within an attack campaign. So somebody, SolarWinds gets compromised, the update goes in, there's now a basis for initial access, but that's not the adversary's main goal, right? They want initial access to subsequently do follow-on things, and those follow-on things are going to have behaviors that should elicit certain responses if we are looking for them. Traditionally, I think in security, we had a very perimeter-focused approach, and I think that's still pretty pretty paramount amongst a lot of organizations. FireEye, again, to their credit, they were obviously looking at those follow-on types of behaviors, from, privilege escalation, lateral movement, anti-forensic methods, things like that. Those things should all pop up somewhere if we're looking. And that's always the big thing, right? Is we think of security a lot of times like we're just building a wall, right? And we're making sure that no one's going to get through that wall. And I think that's an erroneous approach. I think that's an approach that it's going to be breached at some point, whether it be through social engineering or the use of valid accounts. But are we setting up those defense in depth methods to shut down subsequent behaviors? So everybody likes to talk about 0 days and how scary they are, right? Well, I'm less concerned about 0 days if I am focusing on, all the other things that would be, part of a likely attack campaign. And I just don't think in a lot of ways we do that type of risk analysis. And there's a lot of great platforms that we can do those things. So further from that, I think, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the impact that the pandemic has had to people's security posture. I know that a lot of organizations had to go remote, and I know that Jeff, you probably had major headaches and hurdles to jump through in order to accommodate that. So, I mean, talk us through like what you had to endure over the last few months.
Yeah, for us, it was quite interesting. We kind of made the call, or the governor made the call, that we were going to start to move a lot of our employees out of the office environment into the work from home environment in a very short amount of time. And really for us, it was just getting our mind around, okay, how does that look? How does extending our security parameter from where we sit today and extending that out to someone's household? And the logistics of getting everyone out was one thing. So just getting everyone on, VPN licensing. We had a concerted effort there for multi-factor authentication. So we don't have a multi-factor authentication, unfortunately, that's a solution that's enterprise-wide for the state at current time. But we were very lucky that we had a little bit of money from the legislators before they convened. So we're able to get some multi-factor authentication for all those folks with the VPNs, and at least give us another layer of security on the back end there. VPNs for us were a particular issue. I don't know about security wise, but certainly from a functionality perspective, you've got residential grade internet, residential grade equipment that goes along with that. We don't know if some of those networks are now password protected and all the fun stuff that goes along with that. Also, people have a prevalence for using their own computers. So they want to use their own computer because it's set up how they want. Maybe it's better or larger than the one that the state had issued them, but they can't use that obviously to get back VPN into our network. Patching is a concern, I think, for a lot of the folks maybe that are out there. If you have this large work from home workforce now, how do you ensure that those machines are connected long enough to receive your patching, right? And to make sure that those are kind of net worthy, if you will, to make sure that they have the appropriate patching configuration, et cetera, to ride on your network. Just other issues that we ran into, we didn't specify a specific tool as far as a collaborative tool that folks could use. We saw Zoom, Teams, WebEx, GoToMeeting. So some of those, if you remember early on, Zoom had some exploits, Zoom bombing and other things that people could actually exploit features of Zoom to either do possible nefarious things, but most of it was kind of annoyances more than anything. all those things together just, I think, adds to the complexities of getting folks in that work from home environment. I think I saw an article somewhere. The FBI estimated that there was a 600% increase in phishing and exploits specifically tied to COVID. So they're not letting, there's the bad guys don't let any crisis go to waste, and they were on it probably fairly quickly before people really could develop their strategies on how they need to get those folks that working from home secure. Some other things that we just thought about as well too was just not only from a network perspective, but really from from just a physical work environment. Who's able to see your screens? What kind of information do you have on those? Are you printing things? So what are you going to do with this paper now that you've printed it? At work, it might be secure. At home, it might not be. And just there was a whole host of things that we kind of walked through. Some of it was fairly intuitive, and some of it was just learn as we went, unfortunately. So
yeah, I think one of the big challenges that a lot of organizations had is a lot of organizations initially tried to implement, strong security solutions, specifically VPNs and things like that. And when it comes to a security issue, there are security issues with implementing a VPN hastily if proper precautions haven't been taken in terms of how to access that VPN. Much less the endpoint that VPN is connecting to. If that endpoint is compromised and it doesn't have a comprehensive endpoint security suite, and I don't just mean antivirus. I mean a strong firewall solution, browsing solution, behavioral analytics, those sorts of things. Then you're kind of giving the potential adversary a direct line of sight directly into your internal network. So that becomes a security issue in and of itself. But beyond that, when usability is impeded, what does the user do, right? At Shadowscape, we really try to focus on human-driven adversaries, but we have to focus on the user as well. I could implement a million security solutions, but if the user is going to figure out a workaround, that's my issue as well, right? So if the VPN is causing issues, if we have bandwidth issues, they're not going to use it, right? If they are having issues accessing or sharing network resources, they may drop stuff into Dropbox, right, for somebody else to get, and then you've got a blind spot in terms of your usability. So I think what the past year has really illustrated to a lot of organizations is the need to really solidify their policies and how to enforce those types of policies, because you've got a lot of organizations scrambling to try to figure out how are we going to be dynamic, how are we going to ensure that users are doing the right thing. So I know a lot of places have started to really focus on user training. What we like to do is not only do your typical user training, but employ rigorous phishing campaigns to our clients so that as they go, they can start to get an idea of what to look for. But user training is a challenge as well. I know that when you and I were speaking earlier, the mandatory once a year, government mandated cyber training. I did it as a junior Marine, and I'm sure you guys are still doing it. How effective is something like that?
Yeah, a good point, James, is as far as, we've got a lot of, our complete security stack, we've got layers and layers of security. It really comes down a lot of times to the user. And that cybersecurity awareness training is uber important to us. Unfortunately, we do our mandatory training once a year, and it's a fairly, I'll call it semi-generic campaign. And because we have a whole host of, we have got a wide variety of users that we provide training for. Some people are, guys that work for us that are coders or security experts, and then some folks that might work on a crew outside and only use their computer really to put in their time for a time card, maybe check an occasional email. So we had to make something that was usable to all, but it wasn't too advanced and it wasn't too easy either. We coupled that though with you mentioned it, a fish sim, and that I think has helped immensely to just solidify some of those principles outside of the window of our annual cybersecurity awareness training. So we do ours in February. So you think how those skills maybe atrophy by October, November of the following year. We try to keep the folks, or I guess security on the forefront of your mind as we're launching our annual or our monthly fish campaigns, and they're user based, right? So it's if you were to fail one, you click on something you weren't supposed to click on, it gives you an interface then and kind of starts walking you through, hey, you should have recognized this sender. Right. The sender said it was James McCarter. That's how it was. But when you hover over it, it said, comrade from Russia, whatever, on the back end. Or all the misspellings, or that sense of urgencies, or whatever that is that are usually easy indicators of a phishing exploit. So that's how we kind of keep up on our stuff year around. We also follow the National Governors Association has kind of dubbed October as Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So we do another campaign in October. And that one, however, is not mandatory. We throw that out there for everyone as strongly recommended. Try to reinforce some principles there, maybe introduce some new concepts. But for the most part, that's how we attack it here at the state. If I could give anyone some advice on that, is maybe look at your specific business and tailor your training to your business. If you do have a heavy online, you work a lot with maybe credit cards, so you have to have payment card industry, PCI compliance that goes along with that. Build your training to specifically give your folks the tools they need to be successful. And if you were to implement a fish sim, then make sure it replicates what's going on too out in the wild. You don't want them all easy layups. Start to maybe look at work from home environment, for example. We have some that look like they're coming from administrators, from your service desk folks. Hey, click here so we can, I can share my screen with you, or just some simple things that they really should recognize right away as this isn't normal behavior from a service desk person, but also from us. We're also on the back end of that, collecting all the metrics and figuring out how we build our next campaign.
Right, and I think it's important to look in a lot of those solutions. We provide them, but there's lots of great ones out there, and honestly, they're typically pretty cost effective. User training is one of those things that's, it's a necessary evil, right? Because we can't depend on it like this is going to, solve our problems. But definitely we want to cut down on the riffraff. Those things, when I'm a very MITRE attack focused security practitioner, and when I think through the different behaviors that are elicited through the initial access phase, the majority of them come from social engineering, and we've definitely seen an uptick of that over the past year. But similarly to the SolarWinds attack, that's the SolarWinds compromise. That's just the tip of the iceberg, right? That's just them getting their foot in the door. It's what they do subsequently. So definitely something that you can think about as a business owner or manager, but definitely something that you should employ. But moving forward, when I think through the major types of events, it was a cascading series of security failures. And that's by no means critical of those that are tasked with implementing security, as there are a million challenges in front of them. If we all had limitless resources, we'd have much more secure solutions, right? We'd have very secure networks, but it's not just a issue with the dollars that you throw at it. It's also an issue of time. But I was initially talking through how we wanted to approach this, and really wanted to open up dialogue. When I was speaking with David Moore, he threw out the idea that he thought that in the future we're going to have something akin to like a chief work from home officer, right? That's going to have to figure out how we work remotely, and whether organizations go to that step, or at the very least, we need to take into effect how we are going to approach a work from home strategy at the very top level of decision makers. So at your level, the highest echelons of who's making those decisions in the private sector, we're talking your chief level executives. And what I run into as a problem is really communicating those security challenges to the decision makers. And as I address that problem, those that have really dealt within intelligence, that starts to make sense. Like, okay, I really am starting to understand how I should approach this problem. As we conduct all source style intelligence about our own network, which is understanding the threats that are out there, understanding our own risks, and trying to understand the most likely avenue of approach, we need to quantify it in terms of something that those decision makers are going to understand, which is risk, right? And so even if you don't understand, how the intrusion is going to happen, when we start to communicate and help our decision makers understand risk, they can say, okay, I don't necessarily know what the security issue is. I just know that there is one. And if you're telling me that, there's a 50% chance of this happening, and should that happen, it's going to cost, X amount of dollars or labor or something to remediate, it starts to garner some interest. Unfortunately, this largely takes proactive analysis. And those that have served in the military know all about performing proactive maintenance, right? PMing their vehicles and their gear and everything, making sure stuff doesn't break down on the back end. And we need to be doing the same thing to our networks. What have you guys been doing over the past year to try to get in front of these issues rather than focus on remediation?
Well, yeah, and I think the key word that if someone was to take away, what you were just talking about there, James, too, is proactive. And the more you can be proactive, try to get out in front of these things as you're thinking through them. So when we were looking at, let's go back to the tool, for example, the collaborative tool. How are we going to communicate in this work from home environment? You got the Zoom, Teams, GoToMeeting, WebEx, all those things. Select one and know how it's supposed to be configured, know the vulnerabilities, be able to provide the level of support that you need to provide to your user community there as well. But just thinking about too, configurations of your VPN, as you said earlier, I believe, standard configurations, standardizing your desktop configuration too, as far as how your computers are all built. All of that stuff leads to better success down the road, and you're not trying to manage 50 different flavors of maybe an operating system or a particular application or something that you want to use as a service. For us too was just looking at the logistics of how we do this at scale. And we've got small businesses out there, I'm sure medium-sized businesses. So where you may think that you're at a disadvantage because of the funds you're able to allocate to your cybersecurity program, the number of folks maybe you have in your IT department, or those that are actually looking at your cybersecurity, you have a slight advantage because you have a smaller scale, right? You can then control a little bit better, what applications you have, how your workstations are configured, how they're built, and maybe can drive a little bit more of the behaviors that you would need them to subscribe to, I guess, on the back end. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that this is, something that you're probably very familiar with, but we like to talk in terms of the OODA Loop, right? For those that aren't, privy to it, the OODA Loop was put together by I believe his name was Colonel Boyd, who was a test pilot. And the idea that you observe, orient, decide, and act is really the decision-making process for how we orient ourselves in a conflict-based environment. So I think the key there is orient, right? When you are orienting yourself to your environment, you are really getting to understand the environment that you operate in. And what you really try to do in terms of conflict is make it difficult for the adversary to work through that OODA Loop process, that ability to observe, orient, decide, and act while constricting yours. And in doing so, in order to really understand your network is to really document things and try to understand where those issues are and constrict your ability to make those decisions as quickly as possible while making it very difficult for the adversary. So it's a strategic based approach. When we're going through and deciding what security we're going to prioritize, I really think that it's important to understand and focus on what we're seeing within the threat environment. That's why it's so crucial to look back, over a series of years, look back at organizations that are similar and get an understanding of the types of attacks that are being employed, not just against organizations like yours, but organizations that employ infrastructure that's very similar. In doing so, you start to understand the areas that I need to prioritize, because unfortunately, we don't have resources to cover every single thing, right? We need to pour our resources in the areas that we're very weak and we're at high risk, meaning these are our crown jewels, right? And we need to focus on ensuring that those are protected. And we've got a lot of risk here, but also looking externally at the threat environment and saying the adversary is strong now. And we start to see things kind of overlap, saying, well, the adversary is strong, we're weak in this area, we have high risk. That's what I need to lock down now. I need visibility, if nothing else. If I can't detect it, if I can't prohibit it proactively, I at least need to be able to detect it so that I can get in front of it. And that's a process. And there's a lot of useful resources that are out there that can help you do just that, even on your own. And that's something, if you're interested, can reach out to me on the side. But a great place to start, again, I'm a MITRE ATT&CK fanboy. That's a good place to start. It's just a question of understanding where those areas of your most critical assets are, and what you need to be able to do to be able to shut those things down after an adversary gains initial access. Because ultimately the real question is, what are they leaving with? What are they exfiltrating out of our network? And that's our Alamo, right? We got a lot of opportunities to shut it down on the front end. In the security industry, I've heard a million times, and I know, Jeff, you've heard the same thing, that we have to be right every time and the adversary only has to be right once, right? And that's, right. I understand the sentiment, but it's not exactly true. I have a lot of opportunities to catch them before exfiltration if I'm looking, if I'm employing that defense in depth approach.
Yeah, James, and I think just to touch upon a subject you were, just maybe amplify that a little bit. The analysis of your last couple of years events are super important. Things that have happened on your network, things that you've seen within industry, things that are happening within maybe your specific industry, and looking at that, everyone's got limited dollars, right? And building your cybersecurity strategy around what exactly is happening now. So that's a good, that's good portfolio management practices. As say, I've got X amount of dollars. Here's how I'm going to expend those dollars. If you're heavy up front with, everything is invested in your firewall, but your endpoint protection is lacking, it's hard to cover all your bases, but knowing, hey, I need my intrusion detection system here, my endpoint protection system there, firewalls, your email gateway, all of those things. How do I do that effectively? That's kind of maybe through some of those portfolio management practices based upon that analysis and intel that you're seeing in the wild. And then for us, really, something I would foot stomp for people too is, I think complexity is the enemy of security. So the more junk out there that you have, the more doors essentially you have into your network or into maybe a user account, the worse off you are. So as you continue to lock that down and be experts at what you have, that to me is a much better vantage point than just having all of these things that you're not really an expert on.
Yeah, definitely. I've been to countless security conferences, and there's definitely a vendor pressure to buy yourself into security, and hey, buy the latest tool, the latest widget, and you'll get there. And I've seen in a lot of instances organizations that buy a tool and it doesn't magically start making them secure, and that's because there's a lot of security practice that still has to take place in terms of maintaining the solution and setting it up, configuring it properly so that it's capturing the things that you want it to. And a lot of times people don't think through, how is this actually going to be implemented, this solution? And so what I like to tell our potential clients and our current clients is, don't spend money on security without knowing where you're going to have the most bang for your buck, right? And the only way you're going to know that is getting in front of the problem and trying to understand, where am I really weak? In a lot of instances, a lot of the solutions that you have can provide some, pretty comprehensive security solutions through, bolstering security policies, maybe building group policy objects through your existing, Office 365 account, or, locking a lot of things down that you guys use, day to day. But, you hit on a major thing there is simplicity in the network. And I know that your job is certainly daunting, having an entire state with, frayed ends of on at every perimeter, the frayed ends of security and the frayed ends of your sanity, I'm sure. But I do try to focus on paring things down enough to where if something I don't have control over is potentially vulnerable, I at least want to segment it as much as possible. And it's tough in this work from home environment sometimes, because a lot of institutions, they need close access to internal network resources that become very cumbersome to provide that access in a remote workspace. And unfortunately, that leads to a lot of organizations thinking about how we're going to have to do away with demilitarized zones and things like that are allowing for internal security, and it flattens the network, which can be, somewhat of an issue. So again, the bottom line is, do that legwork, get out in front of it. Use this past year as an example for what you need to do as an organization to not only understand the external threats, but more importantly, to understand yourself, right? And understand where those crown jewels are, understand where we need to be focusing our security, and what levels of access do our users really need? I've been, in the private industry for over 10 years, and I know that there's been a lot of instances of users having administrative access in areas that they had no business having that access. And it's not that I thought they were going to do anything wrong necessarily, but people are prone to making mistakes or becoming infected, or there's even coercion in some cases, providing that insider access. So a lot of really good points there. So sorry, we have about 10 minutes left if we want to jump in and field some questions.
Yeah, I was just saying that we've been chatting a while. I was hoping people would just break in if they have things as we go, but haven't heard much yet. But would love to answer some questions for anyone that might have on security, or maybe some planning for future events. Any kind of insight that we can provide to you, we'd be happy to.
Or even an example of something that you've had to do as a user to adapt over the past year.
Yeah, and as we're waiting for that, James, you mentioned a couple of things, and I'll just maybe jump on there too, as tools or places you can go to look for more information, how you can get more savvy, maybe be a little bit smarter on security, especially for those small businesses that might not have, again, dedicated IT staff. You could go to NIST. NIST is a great framework, and there's a lot of good information from the National Institute of Science Technology there, our Standards Technology, the Center for Information Security Controls. That's another one, the CIS controls, that I would recommend highly. Go out and take a look at. They've got 20 controls that they've organized or they've prioritized in order as far as importance to them. The first 7, I think they say, if you're able to achieve negate like 90%, 85% of the known threats and vulnerabilities that are out there. And some of it's just simple stuff, taking an inventory of what you have, knowing who has elevated privileges on your network. And you can then take those same strategies and then apply those, as you're getting folks from that work from home environment. Subscribe to the I think you called it zero trust the other day when we chatted, James, but we're certainly a least privilege. So that's giving people the least amount of privileges they can to do their job and no more, right? So if they need more, they can come back and ask, hey, I need access to maybe this folder subset or this file structure, and locking that down so there's less damage that can happen should someone's account be exploited. And if I know we've run into issues where agencies have elevated control, elevated privileges, and it's just that those are things that we had to get people out of the mindset very quickly, and that was just so they could install things and obviously applications and run on the fly. But just trying to think through some of those things up front, using some of those tools that are available. We've got a cybersecurity website here at the state that I would certainly recommend. We've got a lot of different functions, or a lot of different, redirects to other resources out there, and be happy to help out.
Yeah, I think William has a good question. I think would be great for you to field. Do you have any thoughts on how to create a stronger cybersecurity talent pipeline, both in general and specific to our state? On your level, I'd love to hear what you have to say, and I'll talk through some of my challenges.
Yeah, actually, that's something. That's a great question, William. That's something that we're looking at right now. I know. So the governor had dedicated $1 million last year to U of I. I think. Boise State and ISU to come up with some curriculum and differentiators in their curriculum on how they want to provide cybersecurity talent, IT talent in general. So they were specifically looking at that. I know University of Idaho in particular has stood up a cybersecurity program since then. I know ISU has a very strong one, as does BSU. So that's coming, but we're also working with, so I've been in discussions with some of the community colleges as well. And, for us, a lot of what we're looking for is skills, not necessarily maybe a 4-year degree. So how can someone get out of high school, gain some experience and some skill sets to be successful in the workforce? So they're looking at some of these 4-year or these 2-year institutions like Eastern Idaho, CWI. How can they build a curriculum that gives these kids maybe a cert at the end of it? So there's some experience that goes along with that. So there's internships, on ramp into the workforce. Maybe they're in the workforce for a couple of years. I want to do something a little bit different, management level, more strategic. They get back into, there's an off ramp for a 4-year institutions and finish out their degrees. And just kind of weave in and out of that. Certs are probably in our world one of the biggest things. If you got CISSP, SISM, those are things that really that resonate, I think, with us. But there's also other opportunities out there. So that's some of the things that we're doing in Idaho right now to look at that pipeline issue.
Yeah, I echo a lot of those sentiments that the issue with cybersecurity talent is pervasive, and I try to grow as much talent as I can rather than look for seasoned professionals. But you need both, right? You need the mentor-mentee type mentality, and there's a lot of great solutions out there, but it does require some proactivity. But there's so much opportunity in cybersecurity. So if to echo his sentiment on certifications, go get a book. Go subscribe to like O'Reilly Safari books that's got thousands of books that you can use to get one of those certs and sit for $200-300. I know there's a million organizations out there that would love to have you with just base level certifications from Network Plus, Security Plus, CEH, some of the certs that just show that you have a cursory understanding. Even if you don't have a degree, you can still probably get a job. And then here at Shadowscape, we've got a lot of training solutions, and we're working to adapt to those specific issues as well. So looks like the keynote's about to start, though. So I'm sure there's a lot of good questions, and please reach out to us on LinkedIn or via email, and we can definitely open up a dialogue there. On my side, I do run a company, but I'm always very, very happy to speak to anybody, provide some consultation, just on the side. So appreciate it, and appreciate you, Jeff, sitting down with us, and we'll go back to the main stage from there.
Yeah, thanks everybody.